We started out in Montauk town for the famous Montauk St. Patrick's Day parade. Our 3 families would routinely gather in the Montauk Lighthouse parking lot for barbecues and tailgate fun, in which the kids of the group, at least the oldest ones, would explore around the trails of Montauk on our bikes or on foot. This time we started at the parade, with the lighthouse parking lot as our after-party destination. There was a wild, almost rowdy energy this particular year. First, we started out watching the parade from the top of the converted ambulance that one of the families in our group used as a family vehicle. We ended up skateboarding right into the parade and waving to people as we rode along behind a float. I think people actually thought we were part of the parade, but no one actually knew who we were at all. Just smile and wave to the people who were waving back with confused looks on their faces. Later, myself 10 years old at the time, and 2 other kids who were a year or 2 older, let's call them Jerry and Phil, were walking around the streets near the parade. As if we did not cause enough hell already, Phil thought it was no problem at all to carry his BB gun rifle around with us. I started seeing the looks of horror or shock that people were giving us, and the sense of danger was growing in my gut. The possibility of getting in trouble just by walking near him was very real. I heard the whispers and was sure someone was calling to report us. I know I vocalized how bad of an idea this was. Phil assured us it was no big deal. I wanted to at least be a voice of reason, but I was not going to snitch on him and not ready to run off just yet. I stayed around to see what happened next. Not long after, the police came and apprehended Phil and took him away. I made eye contact with the police, and they realized that neither myself nor Jerry fully consented to Phil's bad idea, so they let us go. We then had to go and tell our parents that 11 or 12-year-old Phil had been arrested for carrying what looked like a small caliber rifle around the main streets of Montauk during the busiest time of the year. How often does a child under 12 get arrested at a parade, I thought. Phil's parents ended up getting him released as a minor, probably ROR, with an arrest ticket of sorts, but I am not sure of the legal details. After all that excitement, I'm sure our parents were eager to get away from the crowds and probably have a drink after all that stress we gave them. We finally reached our favorite destination, the lighthouse parking lot. This time we took the cut, which was a small trail near the south side of the parking lot that took us out to the Montauk Highway loop. We followed the road right into the Camp Hero base on our bikes. I think I was on foot, and the other 3, Phil, Jerry, and Jerry's little brother Mark, had BMX-type bikes, in which I may have rode on someone's pegs. We made our way towards the ocean bluffs. We stumbled upon a bunker's back entrance door, which we now know is named Battery 216, and was completely sealed with cinder blocks except for one small body-sized hole that we could squeeze through. Of course, one by one, we climbed into the hole head first and came down on our hands on the other side. We did not have any flashlights, so our only light source was the daylight that came through that hole. The tunnel angled off to the right after a few feet, which made things even darker as we proceeded. There were hallways off to the right side of the tunnel. Phil made a brief detour into the second room on the right. He peeked his head into the room, into the darkness. I asked him, "What's in there?" He told me there was just an empty room with a metal table and a potted plant on it. He came back to the main tunnel and we decided to head straight through to the other side. Being that we had not one flashlight, if we stay close to the wall and move straight ahead, in theory, we should reach the other side. At this point, I was the last one in line, and as we left the area in front of the hallway, and the very last bit of sunlight, I had the weirdest vision in my mind, which I attribute to a very active imagination. I imagined a large, bipedal, muscular, lizard-like creature with a long tail, possibly small wings, that wanted to get us and to drain our energy. I saw us through its eyes, from within the dark room, and watched our silhouettes pass by the hallway corridor. I imagined that, as it was looking at us, it was hungry for energy, but it felt so weak and drained that it could not lift a finger to approach us. Keep in mind, this wild idea was something that came to me in a brief flash of time as I passed by the doorway of the dark room to the right. I watch a lot of sci-fi and horror movies, and it makes sense to me that this was my imagination. It felt very unusual to see us through its eyes, and to feel its feelings, and I am not trying to say anything specific by relaying this info. I want to paint the full picture of my mindset at this moment. This image is something that has stuck with me for many years. Now, back to reality and onto the really scary part. We proceeded down the hallway with no light other than the minuscule amount of ambient light this far down the hallway, combined with the extra sensitivity we gained as our eyes adjusted to the complete darkness. We ran our hands along the wall for guidance. I stayed close to the right side wall and occasionally felt a door, or lack of a wall, which was definitely a sign of a long hallway. You could also feel the tunnel wind, which was air movement that indicated a room or hallway in that direction. Sounds were enhanced due to our lack of visual input, which also allowed us, to some degree, to hear the shape of the hallways in the rooms. At this point, there was a very small amount of ambient light from just up ahead. Just enough to make the large hole in the hallway floor in front of us stand out as the darkest thing in our field of vision. Besides the pitch-black hole in the floor that extended wall to wall in front of us, there was a very forceful, continuous gust of wind that was blowing up through the hole in front of us. How were we going to cross over this hole? How would we proceed? It looked as if we were going to have to turn back and exit the way we came. When examining the lack of floor closely, we could see that the hole did indeed extend to the wall itself. But there was only some iron rebar left in the hallway floor, closest to the wall. This small ledge extended about 6 to 8 inches out from the wall. It looked like 2 layers of 6-inch thick concrete, which sandwiched the iron rebar in the middle. To make things worse, the rebar, which was all that remained to step on, was also slanted downward slightly. I would say this exposed rebar and collapsed cement portion ran for almost a meter in length across the wall, before growing much wider as the hole rounded outward. Time to cross. My stomach dropped as Phil crossed over first. He was the biggest, and he seemed to use his forward momentum to get himself across, throwing himself onto the ground on the other side. Next, Jerry carefully crossed, facing the wall with his hands, and when he was halfway over, Phil grabbed his arm and pulled him to safety. Next, Jerry's brother Mark was hesitant, as the other 2 encouraged him. I felt my stomach drop, knowing this hole was very deep. You can tell by the force of the wind that blew up out of the hole that this was a large cavernous area beneath us. No time to think about that now. It was focus or die. Mark, the youngest at 8 years old, made it across with his lighter weight and speed, and then the aid of the 2 on the other side grabbing his jacket and yanking him across to aid his forward motion. I realized that leaning too close to the wall when positioned face first, hands against the wall, could lead to the loss of balance followed by falling backwards. I still had time to go back by myself, out of the way we came in. Nope, I came all this way. I'm crossing. I started apprehensively, and then it crossed my mind that the slow inching along, sideways, with both feet pointed outwards and my face against the wall, was not sufficient to cross. I thought of stalling out and falling backwards, and that was not an option. I used a sideways forward motion, almost the beginning of a run, that was aided by a few hands reaching out and grabbing my collar and sleeve, pulling me, guiding me the rest of the way to safety. This was easily one of the scariest and most dangerous things I have ever experienced. Falling in that hole was sure death. Now that we crossed, we knew we had to find a way out of this tunnel by going forward. There was no way in hell any of us were going back over that hole. We decided to test just how deep it was. We found a nice-sized chunk piece of concrete, presumably broken from the floor, and while in a squatting position, inched towards the hole and all listened carefully as we dropped the concrete down the hole. It seemed like 1, 2, 3, splash! 3 seconds before the concrete hit the water, accompanied by what sounded like a cavernous echo. We all exclaimed, "Whoa!" in shock and horror by how close we had come to death moments ago. Now we had to find a way out of this dangerous bunker. There was a distinct light source up ahead now, and the concrete hallway is now covered in a hill of sand. We climb up the hill towards the light. As we started to climb up and then out, following the small amount of sunlight that was shining through, Phil was the first, and due to his larger size, it was a very tight fit. At one point, we were ready to push him out of the hole. One by one, we climbed up out of this hole, squeezing right out onto the beach, on the bluff, very close to a sign that says, "Danger! Keep back from the bluff 100 feet." I remember a bystander seeing us come up out of the hole. He had a bewildered look on his face. I remember the feeling of total exhilaration that we made it out alive.